Afternoon, I'm John Leviakis. I serve as Investor Relations for Domestic Metals. The purpose of today's presentation is to discuss the significance and details of the extraordinary assay and geophysics results and the promising drilling schedule. Our renowned geologists, Dan McNeil and Alan Wainwright, have achieved what could become historical. The stock's attractive capital structure and valuation, its partnership with Rio Tinto and its exclusively U.S. properties add to the appeal. Dr. Peter McGaugh was just announced as technical advisor, a very high-level name in the mining industry. I'll now introduce to you my favorite president, Gordon Neal.
Thank you very much, John. And thank you everyone for joining the webinar. I'm going to keep my corporate summary opening and closing short because this webinar is actually really about the excitement that we have around the geophysics that we put out last week. Myself and Alan Wainwright are actually here in Salt Lake City with Rio Tinto today with Peter McGaugh. He's giving them a 3-day course on carbonate replacement deposits, and it's fascinating, but they're long-winded, and we'll get back to that later. Anyway, I will make some forward-looking statements, so you should be prepared for those. Next slide, please. So Rio Tinto historically drilled 109 meters of 0.75% copper in 2022 at the Smart Creek project in Montana. This is significant. This is a long intercept, and these are good grades. What you should know, though, this is actually distal to the center of mineralization. So outboard, we're still getting great numbers. Rio Tinto selected our geologist, Dan McNeil, and Alan Wainwright to move this project forward. That speaks highly of their regard for our geologists. Our 2025 summer field program returned the highest grade results I'd ever seen in 102 grams per ton gold, 23% copper, and 3,800 grams per ton silver. Dan and Alan went out when they first got this project and actually discovered a porphyry dike at surface. These dikes at surface are unusual, and this is something that Rio missed. Again, the grades on that porphyry dike at surface was 4.26 grams per ton gold. Again, this is a very high number for a surface porphyry dike. We're also looking, as I said, we're looking at an element here, potential carbonate replacement deposit, why Peter came on, why we're with Rio today talking to them about it. And the reason he's giving this talk is he's considered the #1 world's authority on carbonate replacement deposits. The IP that we're about to talk about has given us new multiple large-scale targets. We now have 36 permitted holes on the project at Smart Creek, and we're ready to drill within the next 10 days. I also want to remind you that we are in the world of economic geology. We're not interested in projects that are non-economic, so they have to have grade in tons, like Mag Silver's Juanicipio project, Silvercrest, Great Bear, and Philo. From my personal experience, once you start high grade and you've got tons in grade, it stays that way. I'm going to now pass this. No, next slide, please. Right. Sorry. So in the investment summary on this, we know that the copper and the copper demand and supply is out of balance, and it's the only way we can fix this is to find more copper. The agreement with Rio Tinto is Rio Tinto will maintain 40% of the project. Domestic will earn 60%. The Butte mine to the 50 miles to the southeast of our Smart Creek project produced 20% of all historical U.S. copper production in U.S. history, 22 billion pounds. We are in the same rocks, in the same geological trend, same age of rocks. We are hoping that this is another Butte. Rio presented this project, Smart Creek project, to us on a silver platter. The last 2 holes they drilled was right up against a chargeability high. They basically said, look, step 300 meters to the northwest, and we think you'll have the center of this mineralization, or at least the center of one of the mineralized zones. I did say that we're looking at not only a porphyry, but a carbonate replacement deposit system. And this management team has a history of adding significant value to economic discoveries. So On this slide, as I said, I won't spend a lot of time on this. We know that we don't have enough copper. The supply of copper that's coming online will not meet the demand. EVs, AI, grid augmentation, it all requires so much copper. We don't know where it's going to come from, but we're hoping a lot of it will come from the Smart Creek project. Next slide. So we are in a top tier mining jurisdiction. You can see here that Montana produces 64 billion pounds of copper annually. It's fourth in copper production. It's sixth on the Fraser Institute. As I spoke about, the Butte mine produces 22 billion pounds of copper, and we're in the same geological trend, age, and rocks. You can see we're in good company here. Hog Haven and Ivanhoe, Heddleston, Black Butte, Sandfire is a smaller resource, but very high grade, and Beaverton, and talked about Butte. Those green dots that are in the west side of this image here are all copper occurrences. So you can see that Montana is a highly mineral endowed, and we are in the right jurisdiction. Next slide. Why did Rio option this property to us? I get this question a lot. I'm actually going to turn this over now to Alan, because it was actually Alan and Dan that they approached to take on this project, and he'll explain why. Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Gord. Yeah, so about 3 or 4 years ago, due to the state of the markets and what was going on with the major mining companies globally, as well as in the Western USA, in terms of companies like Rio, BHP, Freeport, and others, they had changed their exploration strategies and basically started deploying their exploration dollars closer to home in brownfields projects, close to their existing mines and existing infrastructure. So for a lot of big companies, including Rio Tinto, a lot of these earlier stage, more greenfields type targets kind of fell into a different category in terms of their budgeting and their priorities for their management. And Smart Creek was in this category, sort of an early stage, promising property, but well outside of the existing operations for Rio Tinto. So Dan and I go quite a ways back with some of the current and past geologists that work with Rio Tinto, including some folks that are in management. And we've worked on behalf of juniors as option partners before with Rio. And they know that Dan and I like to option high quality prospective opportunities, house them in reliable juniors, and then attract money and then put the money into the ground and drill test these things. So that's why Dan and I were offered the opportunity to work on the property and bring it to a high quality junior. So this is when this is about going back about 3-4 years ago now, and we brought the opportunity over to Gordon and Pat Veris. And we've now turned it into some high quality, high confidence targeting environments, which we're going to go over with you today in terms of the geophysics as well as some of the geochemistry. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll dive into some of the technical aspects of the opportunity here and share with you some of the geological, geophysical, and geochemistry attributes for the targets, and share with you some of the reasons why we're really excited about the opportunity from the technical perspective. So it's a big property, measures about 12 kilometers by 10 kilometers, so that's around 5 by 5 miles. Lots of room to find and test targets, as well as build potential mine infrastructure down the road, should we be successful. Access is really good. It's about an hour, 15-minute drive from Missoula, Montana, on paved roads. And then once you get over to the property, there's good access with ranch roads and gravel tracks that get you to all the different target areas on the property. So the main areas that we'll talk about today are numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're spread out across the property, 2 on the west side, 2 on the east side. They all have interesting geophysical characteristics that we'll go through today, as well as some really compelling smoke in the geochemistry, mapping characteristics and the alteration and the character of the outcropping rocks that you can map at surface, all of which are pointing to the direction of 4 main mineralized centers. all of which are probably related to porphyry copper style mineralization. And then on top of that, they have these allied styles of deposits and mineralization potential that lie outboard of the main porphyry center. So these fall into the categories of skarn and CRD. CRD stands for carbonate replacement deposit. 1, 2, 3, and 4, Smart Creek proper is target number 1. Number 2 is an area with abundant outcropping copper mineralization. And then the ones on the west, numbers 2 and 4, Sunrise Mine area and the Radio Tower target, are 2 that we have really been championing over the last 18 months within domestic, and we're bringing these to the forefront of the targeting framework. Next slide, please. So I guess the first thing to talk about is the recently completed geophysical survey. What we finished about 3 or 4 weeks ago it's called an IP survey. It stands for Induced Polarization Geophysics. It's a ground-based geophysical survey run by 5 or 6 technicians at once out in the field. And it's basically a technique where they bring out a power source in pickup trucks, and then they have a cable that they lay out over several hundred meters or a few hundred feet at a time. And along the lines of that cable are strung out a series of electrodes that are going to read the response in the ground. So what the technique does essentially is that the power source charges the ground with current. The electrodes start measuring that current throughout the entire 500 or 600 feet worth of line that is strung out. And then the power is switched off. And then what those electrodes are then doing is measuring the length of time that it takes for the current to dissipate or decay away down to zero. And basically, an interesting anomaly will be something that holds its charge for some length of time as the current decays away. The most common interpretation in these porphyry copper camps or districts is that the chargeable material is sulfides. And at the end of the day, porphyry copper deposits are big sulfide footprints. And that's what the goal of the IP survey is to do, is detect sulfide porphyry footprints. And this is the objective of domestic metals now, to test these things with drilling. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through 2 or 3 examples of some porphyry success stories that have IP signatures that are new in Western North America in the last couple of years. And I'll tell you a little bit about what the chargeability response looks like in these known discoveries for porphyry copper systems. So this one is the Hercules project in Idaho. What you're looking at is a cross-section through a chargeability anomaly shown in purple. And then those are drill hole traces. You're looking into the page at a cross-section again, and those colored orange and blue histograms on the sides of the holes, that's copper and molybdenum mineralization. So what you can see here is that the chargeability anomaly that is modeled in the 3rd dimension as that purple body corresponds directly with the copper molybdenum mineralization in the drill core. Next slide, please. So this next one is a new discovery made by partners A-Mark Mining and Freeport up in north central British Columbia. The target's called the Aurora Porphyry Discovery. And what you're looking at here now is a map looking down in plan view, where the hot colors or magenta and pinks represent the chargeable material as detected by the IP survey. And the cooler colors are not chargeable, so no sulfides mapped there. So I guess the point of this map is to showcase that the mineralized area shown by the drill hole positions as well as the white outline is located in a subset of the domain of the hot colors. So basically the point here is that the copper mineralization occurs within a smaller subset within the bigger footprint of the sulfide as mapped out by the IP. Next slide, please. This last example is from a company called American Eagle. The discovery is called the NAC. It's also in northwestern British Columbia. Here you're looking in plan view on the left-hand side at a chargeability map. And then where all the drill holes are shown in the inner portion of the ring-shaped feature is where the discovery has been made here. So the reason why there's this larger domain of chargeability might be related to something like an intrusive body or multiple porphyry dikes that have a ring of chargeability around them. That is a phenomenon that can happen. And more importantly, in our case here is that There is a spatial association between the location of the porphyry mineralization where the drill holes are to the chargeability footprint, but it doesn't necessarily have to lie right on top of the most chargeable feature. Sometimes it can lie inboard or outboard. So suffice to say that the IP survey is very good at detecting sulfides. And in general, porphyry copper deposits tend to occur either on the anomaly, beside the anomaly, or sometimes below the anomaly. So this is what we're working with now with these 4 main target footprints that we've mapped out with the IP work most recently at Smart Creek for domestic. Next slide, please. So this is a map showing where those lines are at Smart Creek. The square-looking map on the left-hand side is most of the property. Again, it measures about 7 by 8 miles or so. The total length of lines that we did for the IP survey was 26 kilometers. That's about 15 miles. So each line measures about 6 or 7 kilometers, or about 4 or 5 miles. The graph that you see in the center of the screen is an example of a decay curve. So the amount of current left in the ground is shown on the y-axis going up and down, and the time axis is the one going out to the right. So you start out by charging the ground and into the cable that's been strung out over the 700 meters. You have a high amount of current just after you turn off the power source, and then as time proceeds, that current decays away. So the longer it takes for the current to decay equates to an amount of sulfide that is in the ground. And this is exactly what we're looking to detect. So in a nutshell, that's what the technique does. And then what we do is we map out the results, interpret them, flip them into the 3rd dimension, and look for where these sulfide footprints are positioned throughout the target area. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so this is what we get. The first thing that comes out from the geophysical technicians are these cross sections that you see in the top half of the screen. So the topmost of the 2 color diagrams is a hot-cold depiction of resistivity and conductivity. And then the bottom of the 2 colored images is a cross-section of the chargeability. So again, this is the focus of the discussion today. The hot colors shown in magenta and pink depict chargeable material, and then the cooler colors, blues and greens, are positions where there's less likely to be sulfides. And then this is sort of an oblique view of where those lines are in space, and how you have to then take this information and do what's called a geophysical inversion, interpret the data better down into the 3rd dimension, and then get a better idea about the depth of the potential mineralization and the exact positions of where those chargeability anomalies are. Next slide, please. And then this is kind of the end result, where you basically have a chargeability map along each line, and then what you do is you flip these back into plan view, merge this information with some historic data that we have gotten from Rio Tinto from IP work that they did back several years ago, and then you get a big picture for targeting all of the property, and the awareness of where you want to be spending your drill budgets in high chargeable environments versus places that you can confidently say, okay, we're going to pay less attention to those areas. Next slide, please. So we'll go through a couple of those inversion results here. This is an example from the northeastern position at the Smart Creek target in line 6 on the top part of this slide here. The chargeable footprint measures at least 1,500 meters, something like 4,000 feet along that direction from south-southwest to north-northeast. And then it's the other target that is located a couple of kilometers to the south of Smart Creek proper. We call it Smart Creek Exotic. Similarly, it's got a 1,500 meter plus footprint in that orientation, which equates to more than a mile. The scale bar there from 0.4 to 39.2 is basically a metric that measures, that is an interpretation of how you look at that decay curve from the current being charged into the ground to decaying away. Again, the magenta colors are what you're interested in, where those are the chargeable sulfides. The numbers of 39 or 30 plus are very typical of what you get in a porphyry copper environment. And these dimensions about a mile across is a very typical size for the footprint in a porphyry copper environment. Next slide, please. Here we've got the two targets on the west side of the property, Sunrise to the north and Radio Tower to the south. These are good ones that showcase how close the targets are to surface. So they generally get to within about 100 meters of surface or 300 feet, well within the striking distance for a drill hole. And then in general, the confidence level for the geophysics itself starts to fall off after about 400 meters or 500 meters depth. And we have hot magenta colors down to the bottom of the confidence level of these surveys. So the technical team at Domestic is pretty confident that these look like porphyry copper footprints in terms of their dimensions. We think that we can test them with relatively shallow drilling. And we've got confidence that if these do represent mineralized porphyry copper systems, they're going to be continuous down to really good depth, well beyond the ability of this particular geophysical technique. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we were going to flip back to plan view. So we're back now looking at the property, which again is about 12 by 10 kilometers. Again, that's about 7 by 8 miles. We've now merged the IP lines that we conducted in the last couple of months with Domestic with a few lines that Rio Tinto had conducted back in 2021 or so. And this is the resulting targeting map that we have. So the areas that we've been working on that were labeled 1 through 4 that are characterized by alteration mapped at surface that matches what you get in and around porphyries, skarns, and CRDs, paired with the geochemistry results that we have at surface, which showcase where the hot spots are in terms of geochemical leakage on the property. These match precisely with the results that we've gotten in the IP surveys. So here's where we are now with these 4 target areas ready for drill testing. Next slide, please. So, Gord mentioned these great results that we got. So we in terms of the prospecting and mapping that we did last summer and fall, it's really important that you can demonstrate metal tenor and endowment in copper, gold, and silver when you're working in a porphyry camp. So we're not in a barren footprint here. The area is really rich in high-grade gold, very high-grade silver, and extremely high copper numbers, up to 23% copper, that match the position of these IP footprints. And so we're excited about that. So we know that we're in a endowed system with good metal tenor. Another reason why we like the property is the pale blue background on top of the gray topography. That pale blue is a rock unit on the geological map here, which is a Proterozoic. It's about 1 billion years old in age. It's called the Helena Formation. What it is a carbonate unit. So essentially it's a resedimented limestone. The limestones or resedimented carbonates like this are a superb reactive host rock. So when you get a porphyry copper system that overprints a reactive host rock, like the carbonate that we have here in the Helena Formation, you have the opportunity to generate high-grade sulfide porphyry copper ore bodies. In addition to that, the carbonate host rock is of course the optimal host rock that can yield ultra high grade, structurally controlled or bedding controlled carbonate replacement deposits, which is the subject of our short course this week with Dr. Peter McGaugh. So we've got the entire spectrum here on the 4 target areas at Smart Creek that range from the IP chargeability highs that we're interpreting as porphyry copper centers, with the leakage geochemistry and the styles of alteration that are associated with the skarns and the CRDs, which make up that footprint as you go from proximal porphyry out to the distal other styles of mineralization. Next slide, please. And then there you go. You can see some of the highlight reel results, again, up to 102 gram per ton gold, which I can assure you is very unusual to get on an early stage prospecting campaign on an exploration target. These high-grade results correspond directly with the hot magenta colors that we're getting for the chargeable sulfide material mapped out by the IP survey. Next slide, please. So yeah, here just this slide showcases some of those numbers for you again, and Gord has mentioned that it's one of the best results from a prospecting and mapping campaign that he's seen in his career. I can echo the same sentiment. It's normally when you go out and work on these properties, the results typically get worse as you go along. But we were really excited by all the encouragement that we got over the past 6 months of field work, including these results of 100 gram per ton plus of gold, 3,000 plus grams per ton silver, and routinely picking up rock samples with 10+% copper. Next slide, please. And so, domestic, we do pride ourselves on our sort of technical backgrounds and our abilities to work with data, our desire to be real boots on the ground field explorationists, and our intuition for working with data and having a deep understanding of the exploration process. So we perform systematic, multi-layered exploration, and we've been working with the geophysical data sets and layering these up together with the mapping data and the alteration footprints, together with the geochemistry in terms of rock, isotopes, and soil data sets. And this is pointing us to the best parts in the best places on the property so we can maximize the opportunity. Next slide, please. So we're excited to test these by drilling. We've got a 9,000 meter program upcoming. Drill sites are permitted, and we're excited to get cracking on testing some of these superb exploration stage targets. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have the full spectrum in terms of the allied deposits that you get outboard nearby the porphyry copper footprint. So again, we've got our high-grade porphyry copper targets, and these are flanked by the other styles of mineralization that we're seeing on the property. So we've got the textures and the alteration minerals and the mineralization styles that match with the typical mineralization and deposit styles that you see outboard or just outside within about a mile of a porphyry copper center. So these include epithermal gold with breccia textures and vuggy silica, as well as skarn targets with typical garnet pyroxene replacement textures, as well as some of the hallmarks of the CRD environment, such as abundant manganese oxides paired with marbleization of those beautiful host layered resedimented carbonate host rocks, which have the potential to yield high grades. Next slide, please. So here's a sort of a cartoon of where we plan to deploy some of our drill budget. These are some of the main target areas. One of my personal favorites that I'll touch on is the radio tower target. I'm excited because it's one that we generated on our own since acquiring the option on the property. We got really excited when we went out to the field looking to map some dead limestones in an area where we had a few outstanding soil results in the geochemical footprint. And lo and behold, we came across some intense alteration in terms of marbleization of those limestones, development of skarn, as well as some sniffs of some sulfide material that we weren't expecting. So this is what can happen when you go out and you deploy those geochemical and geophysical results backed up by another layer of targeting, which in this case is that boots on the ground mapping technique. And we can instantly do a better job of interpreting the geophysical results based on what we have seen and mapped on the ground. So it has really upgraded that radio tower target in my mind. And I'm really excited to get out and test that one with the drill bit. Next slide, please. Over to you, Gord.
Thank you, Alan. I always get really excited by when you go through the geophysics. We're really ready to go here. Thank you very much. So just, you can have a story like this. And as Alan mentioned earlier, sometimes these projects, when y'all just get on the ground, they test them and they disappoint. This one, every time we test it, it gives us better numbers. It reminds me of Mag's Juanicipio project. And so, it doesn't, if you have a project like this, you have to have good management and experienced management to take these to market, and we have that. I know you guys most know my background mostly, but quickly, I started at Mag Silver as VP Corporate Development with McGaw and McGinnis. Was there for 8 years. Moved away just because it was going into production with Fresnillo. wanted to go into the production area, so bumped into Refang from Silvercorp. He took me on as VP Corporate Development at Silvercorp for a year and a half, and then he found a silver deposit in Bolivia called Silver Sand. He couldn't put it into New Pacific Metals, couldn't run both companies, so asked me to run New Pacific, and I ran that for 7 years and took it to a couple of billion dollar market cap. And then met Hank Van Alphen and worked with him at World Copper, which we just sold that asset to Gil Clausen and Edge. And now I've come on to this domestic, and again, some guys get lucky, and I'm one of those guys. This is going to be. I'm really excited about getting this drilling started. I already talked about Peter. He's downstairs. Stuart Ross is my CFO. He's the founder of a company called Clearly Canadian, one of the best CFOs I've ever worked with, but keeps me on track in terms of budgets and where all my money is going at all times, and all the money we're putting as much as we can into the ground. Now, the two geologists that actually brought this to me are exceptional geologists as well. They're partners, and I want Alan to give his rendition of both his partner Dan and himself.
Yeah, so Dan is the best geologist in Vancouver, in my opinion, and I've been lucky to work with him since about 2007. He's got a long background with major mining companies, including Anglo American and Barrick, where he had about a 10 or 12-year run. He and I worked together all over Europe, including Eastern Europe and Scandinavia. We've worked in all throughout Latin America together as well. Dan's had a lot of success with the drill bit, and he's also got a really good nose for the business and of the exploration world. I've been in the business for about 28 years now. I also started with the majors, working with Rio Algam and Falconbridge. I did a PhD with Ivanhoe Mines at the supergiant Oyu Tolgoi deposit in Mongolia. Since then, I was part of the 5 million ounce gold discovery with Kaminak back in about 2012 or so. And I've worked in academia as well, where I've worked on industry-sponsored research programs in Europe and Asia, looking at porphyry, skarn, and CRD mineralization. For the past 6 years or so, I've been doing mostly consulting work for major mining companies in Asia and Europe. And I've also been working with select projects and groups in Western North America, particularly in projects where I think there's a great chance for discovery, and with groups that I want to work with.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Alan.
yeah.
Next slide. So Pat is here. Pat's our chairman. Pat is here as well. He's actually down. He's a geologist, and he's downstairs right now with Peter and the Rio people. He was the former CEO of Western Potash. He's now the CEO of Sage Potash. He was an executive manager at Far West Mining that got sold to Capstone for 1.1 billion, and he was in the on the Diavik diamond mine discovery. Hank Van Alphen is my partner on all these things. Hank's brought a lot of major projects, mining projects to the space. He brought Corriente, he brought International Tower Hill, Cardero Resources, and Taka Taka are ones that he's brought into this space. John Sharon has been a director since 2016, brings good corporate governance, but more importantly, John knows Montana and worked in Montana. Sorry, went to school in Montana, Montana State. He is a friend of the chief of staff of the governor of Montana now, and is actually making an introduction for us to the governor, which we will meet on our next go around to Montana, and hopefully we can get him to go to the White House and talk about who we are, who Domestic is. David Reed is our largest shareholder. He's also counsel. He's been in the mining business as in the legal space for 40 years. Really sage advice. Great to have him not only as counsel and the largest shareholder, but one of these shareholders who, when I took over the company in November, he was owed $500,000, and when we raised the first raise, I asked him if he wanted his money. He said, "No, I take shares. I'll take those shareholders any day of the week." And I've already talked about myself. Next slide, please. So issued and outstanding, we have 60 million shares after the last round. Insiders own 16%. There are 30 million warrants outstanding. About 2/3, 3/4 of those are 40 cents. for 25% or 33 cents, 4.7 million options, fully diluted 95 million. We are doing, as we talked about, a raise this morning, and I'll answer questions on that. We closed one this morning, and we opened another one. It really didn't open another one. What really happened was I had to close it because we run up against the full amount of the first raise. I couldn't extend it. I had two institutions that a sell side group had brought to me, good big institutions who want to get into this company at this level. It was hard for me to say no. The only way I could let them in was to say the exchange allowed us to put together a new offering at the same price, with the same terms. So I opted to do that to get these institutions in, and that's the reason for the second raise. If anybody has a question, I can answer it fully after the webinar during the Q&A. I think that might be all of our slides. It is. So I'll turn it back to you, Irene, in terms of the Q&A.
There we are. So I've unmuted. Thank you both or so much. That was great. I'm just gonna go through the questions. Let's start with the first one on my screen. Is from Gordon, and Gordon has the following question: can this be mined profitably, and do you have the capital structure to undertake the risk? That's a forward question.
Can this be mined?
For a profit, and do you have the capital structure to undertake the risk?
So first of all, we have to make the discovery first. I can't answer a question about mining something that I don't even know the size of. First, we have to find it first. Now, Alan and Dan and the geophysics and everything we've done have vectored us, and Rio's previous work have vectored us toward where we think if we put 10 to 12 holes, and we have the capital to put 10 to 12 holes in it, can make a mega discovery. Then from that discovery, we have to make it bigger. We have to then start to try to find the edges of it. And once we know what the size is and what the grade is, then we can make a decision as to whether it's mineable. So it's kind of a premature question, but I understand where the question comes from.
So another question is, how deep are you going to drill?
I'm going to let Alan answer that, but I think I know the answer. I do know the answer, but I'm going to let Alan answer that.
Yeah, it'll be a mix of target depths. The range of drill hole lengths will be probably between about 400 and 800 meters. So that's 1,200 feet to 2,400 feet. Not unusually deep. Those are pretty typical target depths these days.
Thank you, Alan. Another question from Mike. So what does the upcoming timeline look like for test drilling, results, next steps, milestones for the balance of the year?
Okay, well, I want to get the drills turning in the next 2 weeks at the most. So I'm getting emails from Alan and Dan about the companies. We're down to 2 companies, but we can get mobilized pretty quickly. So I'm anticipating getting the drills turning within the next 10 to 14 days, when we know where we want to drill. After that, I think I talked to ALS when we were at PDAC. They're fairly optimistic these days in terms of getting results back. The number I'm hearing is 30 to 45 days. I'm a little skeptical of that, given the amount of drilling that the juniors are doing right now. So I'm giving myself a little bit of wiggle room and saying that if we start drilling end of April or early May, and you start pulling holes, I wouldn't do individual holes, single holes. I'd wait till I get a batch of holes, at least 3 to 4 of the holes before I start putting them out. I'm going to say the end of June for assays, middle of July. And the drilling would go into that era. The 10, 12 holes will go into that era as well, July. And Alan can correct me at any time. But I would say we'd be drilling from May to July on these holes. And then what I'm going to say as a forward-looking statement, one of those holes is going to come out better than Rio's hole. And I've been told to expect a hole that's better than Rio's because it was distal to the center of mineralization. We hit that center. I'm expecting holes of 150 meters, 0.15% or higher. If I have those numbers, all I'm going to do is mark it for the rest of the year. Because all I need to do is mark it for the rest of the year. That will hopefully those kind of numbers will move markets. We move markets. We have accretive prices. I lower my cost of capital. I lower my dilution, and that's the plan.
Thank you. Then we have a couple of questions that are related to the cash position. Oh, by the way, Thomas, I see you've raised your hand. I can't unmute you. You just have to drop your question in the Q&A box, please. So a few questions regarding the cash position. One question is, what is the cash balance currently on our balance sheet, and what is our monthly cash burn?
So right now we have $3.4 million in cash. We have more money coming in because of this announced financing that I wanted these institutions to come in, and that looks like it's another couple of $1 million. This is a big project, so we'll need as much capital as we can. Right now, the burn is about $100,000 a month, but that's going to change at the end of the month because we're drilling, 9,000 meters at $400 US a meter. So it's going to jump from 100,000. I haven't done the calculation yet, and I can do it quickly, but it's going to be, it's going to be more than $100,000 a month. So, and that'll come down when we stop the drilling again. And I'm hoping that we'll need some marketing money to take that data out and take it into market and get us an accretive share price.
Okay, thank you. Konstantin wants to know if you can talk a little bit more to the institutions that are interested and what's their intention behind the private placement participation.
Well, I don't really want to go into the names of the institutions because I haven't gotten their funds yet. They've offered their funds and we haven't really collected them. So I don't want to get into the names. They're very well known. Right now, it's three very well known institutions. And I get the question all the time, a lot. How many institutions do you have and what are their names? Once I have them in, I can talk about them. The main thing, Konstantin, is that we're getting institutional interest we're getting institutional interest in a junior resource company with a $15 million, $16 million market cap. That in itself is remarkable. Now, I have a fairly extensive institutional background with MAG and New Pacific, and I know these institutions very well, and most of them aren't allowed to play down at this level of market cap. So the fact that I am getting interest and they're using specific pockets of funds that they have to play to get in early gives me lots of confidence in our geological information that we're putting out and management ability.
Okay, thank you. And then it's hard to avoid this question again. Like, what was the pressing need to do this additional raise right now?
It really wasn't a press. Well, actually, it was kind of a pressing need. It was a timing situation. The institutions that wanted to put their money, that want to put their money in, came into me yesterday, or what day is today? Tuesday, yesterday. The problem was that we'd already extended the first offering once, and it came up to the $3.45 million limit that we announced. The exchange wouldn't allow me to upsize the closing of the first tranche financing I talked about because we'd already extended it once and come up to the essentially $3.5 million. And so the only way to take that money was to announce another financing. And on top of that, the institutions that I'm talking about have said to me, we will put in the money that you need, but we believe that you need more than $3.5 million to find the center of these porphyries and these CRDs. It's not enough. It doesn't make sense for you to take $3.5 million, go out, not hit it, and then ruin your prospects and have to announce that. Take the correct amount of money, which they say is about $7 million. And yes, I understand it's dilutive to existing shareholders. However, I've been doing this long enough to know that if I don't give Alan and Dan enough drill pipe to make sure that they hit something that I can sell to this market, it's going to be tougher for us. So I'd rather take the hit of the dilution and shareholders yelling at me, which they are doing, but get us to a place where we can pull 150 meters of 1.5%, and then it won't matter about dilution. We can move this thing to the next level and still have a 500 million to $1 billion company if we have what I think we have.
Thank you, Gord. One more question regarding the private placement, and then we move on to questions that are more to do with the ground. Serge, and we love this question. Serge wants to know who he can talk to participate in this placement. I think best is to email Gord.
Yeah, just email me and I'll send it on to Marla. Marla Ritchie, our corporate secretary, and she'll take care of all the details. Thank you.
So now we move on. Thomas, I'm happy to see that you found the Q&A box. Thomas has a question. As a practical matter, how easy is it to get the equipment to the target drill sites? Are there rocks?
I can take that one, Gord. Yeah, it's a really good road access project. So it's paved roads, gets you to within maybe 3 miles of the target areas, the easternmost target areas. So there's highway access to the district, and then to get all over the property, there are actually like rancher roads and other types of gravel roads. So it's a really good access property. There won't be a ton of disturbance on vegetation and things like that that takes up time or whatever. And in my experience, this is a really good property for access compared to others that I've worked on.
You can
Two more questions.
You can say that again, Alan. And the Altiplano in Bolivia was holy crap.
Tufael has a question. Given the prospectivity of the license, are you looking to acquire additional land outside but adjacent to the current package? Because the IP targets seem to carry over into the adjacent land package.
Always, and Peter mentioned this morning in his talk. It's always important if you're going to get a project that looks like it could be as important as this, to get as much ground around the property and internally in the property as we possibly can. There is a big section in the center there, which is private, that runs down between Target, Smart Creek and Sunrise. We're still trying to sort out who owns that, and you want to do it early if you're going to try to pick up that ground. And then you want to have an area of influence of at least 1 kilometer, if possible, around your whole project to keep out competitors and the like. But we'll work through that as we make a discovery and then decide. And it gets a little bit more expensive as you make discoveries because the value of the company goes up and people want more. But you have the ability, you have more access to capital and cheaper capital if your share price is higher. So that's when you do it. But you really want to keep people out. Yes.
Good. Thank you. Last question for today, and that is from Greg. And Greg would like to know if actually would like us to describe the permits in place and applied for now and in the future.
Alan, I can take that.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I mean, so there's different types of land in like Montana or anywhere in the Western USA in terms of private versus U.S. Forest Service versus BLM, and so the types of permits change slightly depending on who you're dealing with. And then and sometimes in some cases for some pads, BLM, Bureau of Land Management, for example, will ask for either an easier stage application permit called a notice of intent. And then there are ones that require more serious review by the BLM or the Forest Service. So there's sort of different levels depending on different applications. And so it's kind of a multi-layered thing that in this part of Montana is actually relatively quick. So we're fortunate with the type of people that we deal with at BLM and Forest Service responsible for this area near Phillipsburg, that it's a pretty pro-mining jurisdiction, and the permits are relatively straightforward and not that time consuming compared to other places I've worked in Western USA and parts of Arizona, for example, where it can take up to several years to get a permit for a drill hole. So we're pretty fortunate, I think, in the situation that we're in near Phillipsburg.
Yeah,
Gord, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just to add to that, we have all three layers of those permits. We have patented land, which we can get our own. That's private land. We own that land. There are so some of the permits that we have on the land are private, and we can have those permitted within 2 weeks and on our own. BLM takes about 2 to 4 months. The Bureau of Land Management land, which is about a third of our land, takes about 2 to 4 weeks to get permitted, and the U.S. Forest Service is about 4 to 6 weeks. And as Alan just said, U.S. Forest Service in Arizona, to get a drill permit can take you 5 to 7 years. Montana's a completely different place when it comes to getting permits. And just to give you an example, Rio Tinto had 36 holes that we're using to drill right now. Those holes were actually expired in November of 2024. And instead of going through the 4 to 6 months worth of applications, Dan McNeil, our other geologist, picked up the phone because of the new regime in the U.S. and called the U.S. Forest Service and said, "Would you consider reinstating those permits and extending them for 2 years?" They did so. They did so immediately on the phone, and they extended them for 5 years. So the permitting regime in the United States, because of the Trump administration, has changed dramatically.
Right. And with that, I want to quote David, who wishes us good luck to the team. Drill, baby, drill. So I don't know if you want to close this off, Gord, but I think we've settled in a nice routine with a quarterly update through a webinar. So we hopefully see you again in July and August. And Gord,
Yeah.
the last words to you.
Yeah, I got to say, it feels, this again feels like one of these projects that every time we test it, it just comes back and gives us results that are better than we expected. It doesn't this doesn't happen very often. So I'm very excited. We're going to get the drills turning, and we're going to make everybody on this call and everybody who's a shareholder a lot of money. Telling you, we're going to make this one's going to go. So let's get ready and let's be excited about it. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. We will send out a link to the recording later today or tomorrow morning. Thank you.
We had a very large turnout for today. I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right.